Today is Monday, August 3rd, 2026, and today is National Watermelon Day. And watermelon is one of those things that feels less like a snack and more like a summer event. You do not really eat watermelon casually. There are napkins involved. Someone has an opinion about the correct way to cut it. And somehow there is always one person who says they are finished and then immediately goes back for another piece. But maybe that's why people love it. It's simple. It does not need much explanation. It's just something that works. And August 3rd gives us a few moments where simple things became much bigger than anyone expected. First, we step into a quiet Vermont farmhouse in the middle of the night, where a father swore in his son as president by the light of a kerosene lamp. Then we'll walk into a Radio Shack in 1977, where a small personal computer helped change who could interact with technology. And finally, we'll meet a man whose tires helped put America on the move. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and your guide through the moments where humanity somehow became both impressive and ridiculous simultaneously. The presidency of the United States usually comes wrapped in ceremony. There are crowds, flags, speeches, a stage, a Bible, a moment designed to show the country that something important is happening. But Calvin Coolidge became president in a very different way. No crowd, no cameras, no grand ceremony, just a farmhouse in Vermont and a kerosene lamp. On August 2nd, 1923, Warren G. Harding died suddenly while traveling in California. Vice President Calvin Coolidge was not in Washington. He was visiting his family home in Plymouth Notch, Vermont, and before the country could move forward, the oath of office had to happen. The person who administered it was Coolidge's father, John Calvin Coolidge Sr., a notary public, a father, and suddenly the person standing in front of him was not just his son. He was the President of the United States. Coolidge placed his hand on the family Bible. His father gave him the oath, and the room was lit by a kerosene lamp. That detail is what makes the moment unforgettable. The presidency is one of the most powerful offices in the world. But in that moment, it was incredibly personal. No marble building, no massive audience, no carefully planned ceremony. Just a family home, a lamp, and a responsibility that arrived without warning. History does not always announce itself with a crowd. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it knocks on the door in the middle of the night and asks someone to step forward. And from a quiet room in Vermont, August 3rd moves to a very different kind of light. The glow of a computer screen. In the 1970s, computers were still something most people thought of as distant. They belonged in universities, corporations, government offices, places filled with experts. The idea that an ordinary person might have a computer at home still felt strange. What would someone even do with one? That was the question. Then on August 3rd, 1977, Radio Shack introduced the TRS-80 personal computer. And what made the TRS-80 interesting was not just the machine itself. It was where people found it. Radio Shack was already familiar. It was where people went for electronics. Batteries, radios, cables. Small parts they needed but sometimes did not know the name for. And now, sitting inside that same store was a computer. That changed the conversation. A computer was no longer just something that belonged to universities or large companies. A regular person could walk in, see one, ask questions, and imagine bringing one home. The TRS-80 was not the first personal computer. It was not the only machine shaping the future. But it helped make that future visible. It gave people a chance to look at a computer and think, maybe I could use that. And sometimes that is the moment when technology really changes. Not when the invention appears, but when ordinary people start seeing themselves as part of it. The kerosene lamp in Coolidge's farmhouse belonged to an older America. The TRS-80 belonged to a future that was still being built. And both moments started the same way. Someone stepping into something new. And from a computer that helped bring the future into ordinary homes, August 3rd takes us to something much more familiar. Something most people never think about until it stops working. Tires. On August 3, 1900, Harvey Firestone founded the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company in Akron, Ohio. At the time, the automobile industry was still young. Cars existed, but they were not yet the everyday part of American life that they would become. Roads were rough, technology was changing quickly, and nobody knew exactly what transportation would look like decades later. But Firestone saw an opportunity. Because if automobiles were going to grow, they needed something just as important as the engines. They needed tires, reliable ones. Tires that could handle a country beginning to move faster. And that put Firestone in a perfect position as automobiles became more common. One of the most important relationships in his career was with Henry Ford. Ford was working to make automobiles available to ordinary Americans. Firestone was helping provide the equipment that allowed those vehicles to move. The two companies grew together, but Harvey Firestone's story became even more interesting because of the people he spent time with. He was close friends with Henry Ford. He was also close with Thomas Edison. Along with writer and naturalist John Burroughs, the group became known as the Vagabonds. And the image is almost too perfect. Some of the most influential people in American history, leaving their offices behind, going camping, talking about invention, nature, business, and the future. It sounds like something created for a history book, but it happened. And maybe that is what makes Firestone's story interesting. Not because tires are exciting by themselves, but because sometimes the things that quietly support everyday life are the things that make everything else possible. Cars needed roads. Roads needed transportation. Transportation needed tires. And a small piece of that system helped shape the way an entire country moved. And that brings us to someone whose entire career was built around another kind of everyday transformation. Because some people look at ordinary parts of life and see something everyone else overlooks. She built a career doing exactly that. She was a businesswoman, a publisher, a television personality. Someone who turned cooking, gardening, decorating, and entertaining into a massive brand. Today, we're talking about Martha Stewart, born on August 3, 1941. Before she became a household name, Stewart built a career around presentation. She had a talent for taking ordinary things and making them feel intentional. A meal, a table setting, a garden, a home. She turned those everyday subjects into an entire media empire. Magazines, books, television, products, a brand recognized around the world. But her story also includes one of the most public falls from grace in modern celebrity culture. In the early 2000s, Stewart was convicted in connection with an insider trading investigation and served time in federal prison. That became the moment many people used to define her. But that is only part of the story. Afterward, Stewart rebuilt her career. She returned to television. She continued creating products and media. And she became an example of something complicated. A person can make a mistake. A person can face consequences. And a person can still continue building something afterward. That complexity is part of what makes her interesting, because real people are rarely only one thing. The entrepreneur, the celebrity, the person who succeeded, the person who failed, the person who adapted. Anyway, August 3rd is a reminder that the things we remember are often built one decision at a time. A president steps into power in a quiet farmhouse. A computer appears in a neighborhood electronics store. A tire company helps move a nation forward. And a person turns ordinary parts of life into something much bigger. History is not always created by the loudest moments. Sometimes it is created by people who simply notice what others overlook. And that reminds me of something Martha Stewart once said. Life is too complicated not to be orderly. If you'd like to hear more of my work or explore the various projects I continue accidentally collecting, you can find everything at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns. Thanks for spending part of your day here. I'll see you tomorrow.